Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General Dempsey and Secretary Carter, for coming today and also for your service to our country. In February, the President submitted an AUMF to Congress that we never put to a vote. I believe that we must have a full and open debate on the ongoing operations in the Middle East. Given the ever-changing situation, has there been any thoughts to updates or changes to the AUMF measure since it was submitted? For example, is there more clarity on the phrase enduring offensive ground combat operations?
Thank you. I'll answer that. The very question that the chairman and I asked ourselves about the AUMF now several months ago, and I actually testified about the AUMF, asked ourselves two questions. One was, did this give us the needed flexibility and authority to conduct the campaign that is necessary? And the second is, would its passage clearly signify to our people that our people, meaning our men and women in uniform and the other members of the Department of Defense, that the country is behind them in this fight? Those are the two things that are important about the AUMF to me. The features, that the first question is affirmative for me in the version that the President submitted, because it was flexible or broad in its definition of ISIL and the enemy, so to speak, because it was not geographically limited, because we know ISIL is geographically limited. It had the 3-year piece in it, which is not anything to do with the military campaign. I can't tell you that in 3 years the campaign against ISIL is going to be over. The 3 years in the AUMF is recognition of our constitutional system, the fact that there'll be a new president and that Congress and the new president ought to be able to revisit a strategy seems reasonable to me, but it's not really a military thing. The only restriction within it is about long-term, large-scale offensive combat operations, which we judge, for all the reasons we've been describing earlier today, are not part of our strategy and we don't think are going to be needed to combat ISIL. Therefore, I'm okay with that provision in the AUMF the President has submitted. So those are the questions we asked ourselves, and on both of those grounds, I hope that it will pass. I can't say whether it's legally necessary in any sense, but I think it would show support for the troops, and in that sense is a good thing.
All right. For Secretary Carter again, last week an additional 450 troops were deployed in support of Operation Inherent Resolve. However, you have said personally that, and I quote, we can do nothing that we can substitute for the Iraqi forces' will to fight. And following the fall of Ramadi, you also made similar comments. I think you made comments as well today. I think many of us here in Congress are gravely concerned that the administration is considering committing a substantial American ground force to the ongoing efforts to combat ISIS, as it has been 10 months and we have slowly seen a ramp-up of U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. Are options being considered to redeploy a substantial ground combat force to the region to combat ISIS? If not, at what number will the line be drawn for American forces in Iraq? I think we all want to know, how does this end, and where do we draw the line on American involvement in this conflict?
The essence of the strategy is not to have U.S. forces substitute for capable and motivated local forces, but to have U.S. and coalition forces enable those forces. And the reason for that is that that's the only way to get a lasting result. American forces, outside forces can combat, but then it comes time for them to sustain the victory, and that can only be done by local forces. That's the reason why our strategy is not to put in 100,000 American troops. It is to put in smaller and carefully selected groups that can have unusual leverage. That's the point about Taqadum. It's not about the number of people that are there. It's the leverage they're going to have. They're right in the middle of Sunni recruiting territory, and we want Sunnis, and it's right in the middle of where the Anbar Operations Center is that we can help the Iraqi armed forces.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kaufman.